I'm not resisting! Sir, I am not resisting! Stop moving!
A routine traffic stop for driving just 10 miles per hour over the speed limit usually ends with a simple warning or a $150 fine. You sign the ticket, you pay the court, and you move on with your day. But for the regular taxpayers of Madison County, this specific traffic stop just cost them exactly $80,000. It was not because the driver was a dangerous criminal, and it was not because he had something illegal hidden in his vehicle. Instead, it was because a police officer let his anger get the best of him during what should have been a normal 5-minute interaction. How exactly did a textbook minor driving violation escalate into a massive federal civil rights lawsuit that cost the county a fortune? To understand how everything went so wrong, we have to look at how the entire situation began before the yelling started. The police cruiser comes to a complete stop behind the silver sedan. For a few seconds, everything is completely quiet. The officer inside the cruiser finishes typing some information into his dashboard computer before opening his door and stepping out onto the gravel. This is Deputy Miller, a 5-year veteran of the county sheriff's department. On the outside, it looks like he is performing a completely normal traffic stop that he has done 1,000 times before. He walks slowly and carefully toward the driver's side of the silver sedan, keeping his hand close to his belt, which is standard safety practice for any police officer approaching an unknown vehicle. Inside the sedan sits a 24-year-old man named James. James is just an ordinary citizen on his way home from a quick trip to the grocery store, and he has never been in any serious trouble with the law before. As Deputy Miller gets closer to the window, James lowers the glass all the way down so they can speak clearly. He places both of his hands firmly on the top of the steering wheel where the officer can easily see them. This is exactly what safety experts recommend people do during a traffic stop to show they are not trying to hide anything or reach for a weapon. Deputy Miller leans down slightly and looks inside the car. His voice is deep and serious, but he starts out using standard professional language. He asks James for his driver's license, proof of insurance, and the vehicle registration. James nods quickly and answers politely, saying that he has all of those documents ready for him. However, even through the shaky body cam footage, you can tell that James is visibly nervous. His hands shake just a little bit as he reaches into his pocket to grab his wallet. It is very common for ordinary people to feel anxious when they get pulled over by the police, even when they know they have done nothing wrong. Deputy Miller takes the driver's license and explains the exact reason why he initiated the traffic stop. He informs James that he was clocked on radar doing 45 miles per hour in a zone where the speed limit is strictly 35 miles per hour. James listens carefully and apologizes right away, explaining that he simply was not paying close attention to his speedometer because he was thinking about his schedule for the rest of the day. He does not argue with the officer, he does not make excuses, and he remains completely cooperative from the very beginning. Everything about this interaction seems perfectly fine on the surface. It looks like the kind of stop that should end with a quick warning or a standard ticket before both men go about their day. But if you listen closely to the tone of Deputy Miller's voice, you can start to notice a subtle hint of irritation. He seems unnecessarily impatient, acting as though James is deeply inconveniencing him just by being there. Little did James know, Deputy Miller was already having a very stressful day, and he was about to push the boundaries of his police authority much further than the law allows. With the driver's license already in his hand, Deputy Miller stands by the open window and asks James to hand over his vehicle registration and proof of insurance. James nods politely and begins to reach across the front seat toward the glove compartment on the passenger side of the car. But before he opens it, James pauses for a quick moment. He looks back up at the officer and asks a very simple, polite question. He says, "Sir, do you mind if I record this on my cell phone?" James is completely within his legal rights to ask this, and citizens are allowed to record their interactions with the police in public spaces. He simply wants to ensure he has a personal record of the conversation just in case anything goes wrong. It is a reasonable request, and James asks it in a completely calm and respectful tone of voice without any attitude. However, the moment those words leave James's mouth, the entire atmosphere of the traffic stop changes instantly. The calm afternoon vibe vanishes and a heavy tension takes its place. Deputy Miller's facial expression completely changes, and his body language hardens into a stance that is deeply aggressive. Instead of answering the simple question or giving a straightforward yes or no, the officer steps even closer to the car door. He leans his head down toward the open window, narrowing his eyes angrily. He does not ask for the registration anymore. Instead, he uses a very loud, commanding voice to say, "Step out of the vehicle right now." James looks completely confused by this sudden shift in energy. He freezes with his hands still resting near the dashboard, unsure of what he did wrong to deserve such a harsh reaction. He looks at Deputy Miller and asks why he needs to step out of the car just for a minor speeding ticket. James explains that he has his registration right here in the glove box and is completely ready to give it to him so they can finish up the paperwork. But Deputy Miller does not want to hear any explanations. The officer's ego seems bruised because the young driver wanted to record the interaction, and he views the question as a personal challenge to his authority. Instead of explaining that officers sometimes ask drivers to step out for safety reasons, Deputy Miller just repeats his command even louder. He barks out the order again, telling James to open the door and get out immediately. James is not trying to be difficult, but he is genuinely scared by how fast the situation is escalating. He keeps his hands where the officer can see them and asks one more time, "Sir, please tell me why I have to get out of my car. I am cooperating with you and I am just trying to get my papers." This innocent question only makes the officer angrier. The stage is now completely set for a major power struggle, as a routine traffic stop turns into a serious confrontation because an officer refuses to explain his actions to a cooperative citizen. Instead of explaining the law calmly, Deputy Miller completely loses his temper. In the United States, a famous Supreme Court case called Pennsylvania v. Mims actually gives police officers the legal right to order a driver out of a vehicle during a traffic stop for safety reasons. If Deputy Miller had simply explained this rule to James, the entire situation could have been resolved peacefully in just a few seconds. James was not trying to break the law. He was just scared and wanted to know what was happening. But instead of acting like a trained professional and citing the proper protocol, the officer lets his own pride and anger take complete control of his actions. He decides to use brute force rather than words to get what he wants. Without giving James another chance to speak or move on his own, Deputy Miller reaches out, grabs the external handle of the car door and yanks it wide open. Before James can even react to the door swinging open, the officer reaches inside the vehicle, aggressively grabs James by his left arm, and forcefully wrenches him out of the driver's seat. The sudden, violent movement catches James completely off guard. As he is dragged out onto the hard ground, his cell phone slips from his fingers and drops onto the floorboard of the car, spinning out of reach. James is completely terrified and starts crying out in pain, trying to understand why he is being treated like a dangerous criminal just for asking a simple question about his rights. Even though James is completely compliant and is not fighting back in any way, Deputy Miller does not slow down. The bodycam footage clearly catches the officer using an extreme amount of excessive force on a nonviolent person. He shoves James roughly against the hot metal hood of the police cruiser, twisting James's arm painfully behind his back. James keeps his body completely still and does not pull away, repeatedly telling the officer that he is not resisting. Yet, Deputy Miller continues to press his full body weight against James, pinning him down forcefully against the car. This exact moment is the absolute core of the entire lawsuit, and it is the reason why the county would eventually have to pay $80,000. This is the part of the video that makes viewers in the comments section so incredibly angry. Police officers are granted a lot of power, but they are strictly required by policy to use only the amount of force that is necessary to control a situation. James was never a threat, he never raised his voice and he never threatened the officer. By letting his ego take over the official protocol, Deputy Miller turned a simple conversation into an illegal assault. He violated the department's strict policy on force, broke the trust of the community, and crossed a major legal line that would cost the local taxpayers a massive amount of money. The loud screeching of tires breaks the silence on the quiet road as two backup police cruisers arrive at the scene. Sirens wail softly before being shut off, and two secondary officers quickly step out of their vehicles to see what is happening. As they walk up, they find Deputy Miller still holding James tightly against the hood of the car, clicking a heavy pair of metal handcuffs around the young man's wrists. If you look closely at the bodycam footage from these new officers, you can immediately see a shift in their facial expressions and body language. They look visibly uncomfortable and confused. There are no signs of a fight, no weapons on the ground, and James is openly crying while keeping his body completely still. The backup officers do not say anything out loud to criticize Deputy Miller right away, because police culture often discourages questioning another officer in public. However, their hesitant movements and quiet glances at each other make it obvious that they realize the situation has been handled very poorly and that excessive force was likely used against a compliant citizen. Deputy Miller roughs James up just a bit more as he walks him over to the rear door of his police cruiser. He opens the door and shoves James into the cramped, hard plastic back seat. The door slams shut with a heavy thud, trapping James inside. Through the thick wire mesh partition separating the front and back of the cruiser, James can be heard screaming out questions through his tears. He repeatedly asks, "Sir, please tell me what I am being arrested for. What did I do wrong? I was just getting my papers." Deputy Miller completely ignores the questions, refusing to look back or offer any explanation to the terrified young man. Instead, he walks back over to James's empty silver sedan to find a way to justify his violent actions. Without asking for permission and without having any legal warrant or probable cause, Deputy Miller opens the driver's side door and begins a thorough search of James's personal property. Under the law, police officers cannot just search a car during a minor traffic stop unless they see something illegal in plain sight or smell something suspicious. Deputy Miller has absolutely no legal reason to tear through the vehicle, but he is desperately searching for anything that can make James look like a criminal to protect himself from getting into trouble. He rumbles through the glove box, checks under the seats and flips through James's personal belongings, but he finds absolutely nothing illegal. Realizing that he has arrested an innocent man for no good reason, Deputy Miller walks back to his computer and begins typing up a series of completely false, bogus charges. He formally charges James with resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. He hopes that by writing these serious words on the official paperwork, his supervisors will believe that James was the dangerous one, completely hiding the fact that his own anger caused the entire disaster. While sitting in the cramped hot back seat of the police vehicle, James remembers his legal rights. Through the small gaps in the plastic window divider, he raises his voice so Deputy Miller can hear him clearly. James firmly requests that a police supervisor be called to the scene right away. By law and department policy, citizens have the right to ask for a higher-ranking officer if they feel they are being treated unfairly during an interaction with law enforcement. James hopes that an older, more experienced officer will arrive, look at the situation logically, and realize that a massive mistake has been made. He believes that a supervisor will act as a safety net to protect him from Deputy Miller's anger. Deputy Miller reluctantly grabs his radio microphone and calls for a sergeant to come down to the road. About 15 minutes later, a white supervisor SUV pulls up to the scene, and Sergeant Davis steps out. He walks over to Deputy Miller first, and the two officers stand near the trunk of the car, talking in quiet voices out of range of James. Deputy Miller explains his version of the story, claiming that James was being highly uncooperative, refusing commands and acting suspicious. Instead of doing a real investigation, Sergeant Davis just nods his head and accepts everything his deputy says as the absolute truth. He does not ask to watch the body cam footage from Deputy Miller's camera, and he does not try to look at James's cell phone to see what really happened. After talking with his deputy, Sergeant Davis finally walks over and opens the rear door of the cruiser where James is sitting in handcuffs. James immediately tries to explain his side of the story through his tears. He tells the sergeant that he was completely polite, that he was just reaching for his registration, and that he only asked if he could record the interaction before Deputy Miller violently dragged him out of the car. But Sergeant Davis does not want to listen to James at all. He cuts James off mid-sentence and says in a cold, dismissive tone that the deputy had every right to pull him out of the car for non-compliance. He tells James that he can explain his story to a judge in a courtroom, completely backing up his deputy's bad actions. This moment right here is incredibly important, and it adds massive fuel to the legal fire. In a civil rights lawsuit, if only one bad officer breaks the rules, it can sometimes be hard to sue the whole local government. But when a high-ranking supervisor arrives, refuses to look at the evidence and automatically approves of the bad behavior, it shows a much bigger problem. It proves to the court that the county sheriff's department has a widespread pattern of behavior where bad actions are tolerated and protected by management. By failing to act as a safety net, Sergeant Davis made the county liable for the entire mess, paving the way for a major federal lawsuit because the leadership chose to protect a bad officer instead of protecting the constitutional rights of a citizen. Fast forward 3 months after that stressful afternoon on the side of the road. James has had to live with the fear and embarrassment of being arrested, but he has not given up on seeking true justice. He decides to hire an experienced civil rights attorney who specializes in protecting ordinary citizens from police misconduct. The very first thing the legal team does is file an official request to get a copy of all the police body cam and dashcam footage from that day. Because of the open records laws, the county has to hand over the videos. When James and his lawyer sit down to watch the footage in a quiet office, they know they have exactly what they need. The video does not lie. It clearly shows James sitting perfectly still, speaking politely, and keeping his hands on the steering wheel right up until the moment Deputy Miller loses his temper and violently yanks him out of his vehicle. Armed with this clear video evidence, James's attorney schedules an official meeting with the local county prosecutor, who is the government lawyer in charge of deciding whether to take James to trial for resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. Usually, prosecutors trust the written police reports that officers turn in after an arrest. But when this prosecutor actually sits down and watches the real body cam footage with his own eyes, the entire situation changes instantly. The prosecutor realizes within just a few minutes that Deputy Miller's written report is completely inaccurate and full of false statements. James never resisted and he never obstructed anything. Realizing that the county has absolutely no case and that the arrest was completely unlawful, the prosecutor immediately signs the paperwork to drop every single criminal charge against James. James is finally cleared of all wrongdoing, and his record is totally clean again, but he and his legal team know that simply dropping the charges is not enough. An innocent citizen was assaulted and locked in a jail cell just because an officer let his anger take over. If they just walk away now, Deputy Miller and his supervisor will keep doing the exact same thing to other drivers in the future. Armed with the powerful body cam footage that completely disproves the police report, James's legal team takes a massive step forward. They officially file a major federal civil rights lawsuit against Madison County, the Sheriff's Department, and the specific officers involved. The lawsuit formally accuses them of wrongful arrest, using excessive physical force and violating James's constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. The battle is no longer happening on a dark, lonely road. It has officially shifted to a formal federal courtroom, and Madison County is about to realize just how expensive their officers' bad behavior is going to be. As the federal lawsuit moves forward, the top leaders at the Madison County Sheriff's Department realize they are in a lot of trouble. They quickly launch an official internal affairs investigation to look deeply into the actions of Deputy Miller and Sergeant Davis. Investigators look at the clear body cam footage, compare it to the false written reports, and realize that the officers broke serious department rules. Faced with the solid evidence and the high chance of being fired, Deputy Miller decides to resign from his job as a police officer before the investigation can even finish. Meanwhile, Sergeant Davis faces serious trouble too. He receives a long suspension without pay for completely failing to do his job as a supervisor on the scene. The department wants to distance itself from the bad behavior as fast as possible, but the legal damage has already been done, and they still have to answer for the federal lawsuit. The county's high-priced lawyers look at the video and know they will lose terribly if they go in front of a jury in a real trial. They know that ordinary citizens on a jury will be absolutely furious when they see a polite young driver treated so violently just for asking to use his cell phone. To avoid an even bigger disaster in court, the county leaders decide to ask James and his legal team for a meeting to settle the case out of court. After days of serious arguing and negotiations, both sides finally sign a formal piece of paper. The final agreement states that Madison County will pay James exactly $80,000 to drop the lawsuit and make the case go away forever. It is very important to understand exactly where this $80,000 payment comes from. The money does not come directly out of Deputy Miller's bank account, and it does not come from the personal pockets of the sergeant who backed him up. Instead, this huge amount of money comes directly from the Public Insurance Fund of Madison County, which is entirely funded by the hardworking local taxpayers. Every single dollar of that settlement is money that could have been used to fix broken local roads, improve public schools, or build better community parks. Instead, the local citizens have to pay the ultimate price because an officer let his pride and anger get the best of him during a simple 5-minute traffic stop. The money helps James pay for his expensive lawyer fees, covers the cost of his medical bills from being shoved onto the car, and compensates him for the extreme fear and embarrassment he suffered during the wrongful arrest. After the final settlement papers are officially stamped and approved by the federal judge, James's lead attorney stands on the steps of the courthouse to deliver a powerful message to the public. He looks directly at the news cameras and says that this case was never just about the $80,000. He explains that it was about standing up for the basic rights of every single citizen and showing that no one, not even a person wearing a shiny police badge, is ever above the law. This entire situation offers a very important lesson about what your legal rights actually are whenever you find yourself pulled over by law enforcement on the side of the road. First, it is crucial to know that you have an absolute constitutional right to record a police officer in public spaces, as long as you are not actively getting in their way or interfering with their official duties. James was completely allowed to ask to use his phone, and you are allowed to do the same to keep a safe record of what happens. Second, you do have to follow certain direct commands for safety. As we mentioned earlier with the famous Supreme Court case, if an officer strictly orders you to step out of your vehicle during a traffic stop, you are legally required to do so, even if you do not understand why or think it is unfair at the time. You can always argue the details later in front of a judge, but you must step out of the car when ordered. However, the most important part of the lesson is that you always retain the right to be completely free from unreasonable searches and excessive physical force. Just because an officer orders you out of a car does not mean they have the right to violently grab you, slam your body against a vehicle, or tear through your personal glove box without a warrant or a very good legal reason. When officers let their personal feelings control their actions, the consequences are incredibly costly for everyone involved. A person's ego can easily turn a completely simple, ordinary traffic stop into a massive legal disaster that wastes thousands of tax dollars. Now that you have seen the entire story unfold from the very first seconds on the quiet road to the final settlement on the courthouse steps, we want to know what you think about how this situation was handled by the local government. Do you think that Madison County settled this lawsuit too quickly just to protect their reputation? Or do you believe that the officer should have faced actual criminal charges for using that kind of excessive force against a nonviolent driver? Please share your thoughts and let me know your honest opinions in the comments section below, because we read through them to see what our community thinks about these important cases. If you want to see more detailed video breakdowns of real justice being served, make sure to hit that big red subscribe button right now and turn on all your notifications so you never miss a new story. By subscribing, you help our channel grow and ensure that we can keep shining a bright light on police misconduct and citizen rights across the country. Thank you so much for watching today's breakdown. Stay safe out there on the roads, and we will see you right here in the next case.